The text arrived at 2:18 a.m. My phone buzzed once, then went silent, but it was enough to jolt me awake. I reached for it groggily, expecting it to be another late-night work notification or, at worst, a spam email. Instead, it was a message from an unknown number. Your wife isn't where she says she is. Look deeper. For a moment, I stared at the screen, wondering if it was some kind of sick joke. Vanessa was asleep beside me, or at least, I thought she was. When I glanced to my right, the bed was empty. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge from the kitchen downstairs. I got up, padded down the hallway, and checked the bathroom. Empty. The guest room? Also empty. By now, my heart was racing, a combination of confusion and unease clawing at my chest. Where the hell was she at this hour? The next morning, Vanessa was back in bed, her phone clutched in her hand as she pretended to scroll through emails. I casually asked, "You were up late last night. Couldn't sleep?" She didn't even flinch. "Yeah, just couldn't shut my brain off. Work's been insane." That's how it started, with a seemingly innocent lie. Vanessa and I had been married for 7 years, and until now, I would have sworn we were happy. Sure, we had our rough patches like anyone else, but she was my best friend, my partner. Or so I thought. Over the next few weeks, things began to unravel. She started working late more often, canceling date nights, and acting distant. Little things that wouldn't mean much on their own but, together, painted a troubling picture. I tried to push the suspicions out of my mind, chalking it up to stress. But then there was the second message. Business trip? Think again. It arrived the day Vanessa told me she had a conference in Chicago. 2 days, tops. She'd kissed me goodbye that morning, suitcase in hand, promising to call when she landed. That evening, curiosity, or paranoia, got the better of me. I checked our shared credit card statement online. A charge caught my eye, a fancy dinner at a downtown steakhouse. Vanessa hated steakhouses. The decision to hire a private investigator felt dramatic, even desperate. But I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Marcus, the PI, was a no-nonsense guy in his late 40s, the kind you'd expect to see in an old detective movie. Within 2 weeks, he had everything. The photos, the texts, the hotel receipts. Vanessa hadn't gone to Chicago for a conference. She'd gone with Jake Stanford, her coworker, the man I'd met at last year's Christmas party, the one who'd laughed too hard at her jokes and seemed a little too eager to refill her drink. It was all there, laid out in black and white. A weekend of betrayal, wrapped in lies. That night, as Vanessa sat across from me at dinner, scrolling through her phone and laughing at something, I felt a surge of anger so intense it almost scared me. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to throw her phone against the wall and demand an explanation. Instead, I smiled. "Everything okay?" she asked, glancing up. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone light. "Everything's fine." Because it wasn't time yet. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy her. The hardest part wasn't discovering the betrayal. It wasn't even looking at the photos Marcus handed me. Vanessa in a red dress I'd never seen before, her hand in Jake's as they walked into a hotel. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know. That morning, Vanessa sat at the kitchen island, sipping her coffee, scrolling through Instagram like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her from the doorway, memorizing every detail of her face. There was no guilt, no shame, not even a flicker of unease. "Babe, do you mind picking up some wine for dinner tonight?" she asked, looking up with a casual smile. "Sure," I said, my tone even. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her smile fading for the briefest second before she turned it face down on the counter. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to play along. I spent the next week planning. The goal was simple: expose Vanessa's betrayal in the most calculated, undeniable way possible. If I played my cards right, I'd walk away from this marriage with my dignity, my assets, and a little justice for the years I'd wasted on her. Step 1. Gather the evidence. Marcus had already given me the photos and texts. I added to the collection by keeping tabs on her myself. I installed a GPS tracker on her car and synced it to my phone. Each time she told me she was working late, I tracked her location. 9 times out of 10, She ended up at Jake's apartment. Step 2. Protect myself. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, Greg, who had a reputation for being ruthless in court. When I laid out the situation, Greg leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin. "This is good," he said, nodding at the folder of evidence. "Infidelity is a game-changer in divorce proceedings, especially in this state. No alimony. No division of assets in her favor. She'll walk away with nothing." "That's the idea," I said. Step 3. Set the trap. Vanessa's company was hosting a formal dinner at the end of the month, a networking event for employees and their spouses. Jake would be there, along with their colleagues and senior management. It was the perfect stage. In the days leading up to the event, I played my role perfectly. I brought her flowers, cooked her favorite meals, and even suggested we take a weekend trip after the dinner. She seemed surprised but didn't question it. "You've been so sweet lately," she said one night as we curled up on the couch. "Just trying to be a good husband," I replied, hiding my bitterness behind a smile. The night of the dinner arrived. Vanessa looked stunning in a sleek black dress, her hair styled in soft waves. She kissed me on the cheek as we left the house, and for a moment, I almost forgot what she'd done. Almost. We arrived at the hotel, where the banquet hall was buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses. Vanessa drifted off to mingle, leaving me alone near the bar. I spotted Jake almost immediately, tall, blonde, with the kind of smug confidence that made my blood boil. He was laughing with a group of colleagues, but his eyes kept darting toward Vanessa. Showtime. As the evening progressed, I waited for the right moment. Vanessa and Jake were careful to avoid each other, but I saw the glances they exchanged, the subtle touches as they passed each other. When dinner was served, I made my move. I stood, raising my glass for a toast. "Excuse me, everyone," I began, my voice steady. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude for this wonderful company and the amazing people here tonight. It's inspiring to see such strong relationships, both professional and personal. Vanessa froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "And speaking of relationships," I continued, "I'd like to share something personal. You see, my wife, Vanessa, has been incredibly supportive over the years. But recently, I discovered she's been sharing that support with someone else." A murmur rippled through the room. Vanessa's face turned pale, her eyes wide with panic. "Jake Stanford," I said, locking eyes with him across the room. "Stand up, buddy. Don't be shy." The color drained from Jake's face. He stammered something incoherent as everyone turned to look at him. "I have photos, texts, and even hotel receipts," I added, pulling a folder from my jacket. "If anyone's interested in seeing them, feel free to ask me later." The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Vanessa tried to grab my arm, hissing, "Ethan, stop." But I wasn't done. "I'll be filing for divorce first thing Monday morning," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Vanessa, I suggest you start looking for a new place to live." With that, I walked out, leaving her standing there, humiliated and exposed. As I drove home, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, relief, and a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Satisfaction. It wasn't over yet, but I'd just taken the first step in taking my life back. The drive home that night felt surreal. The adrenaline coursing through me was fading, replaced by a cold, calculating calm. I replayed the scene in my head, the looks on their faces, the gasps from the crowd, Vanessa's mortified expression as I walked out. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not yet. There was still more to do. Vanessa didn't come home that night. Not that I expected her to. I figured she'd be holed up at a friend's place or, more likely, Jake's apartment. Good. It gave me time to prepare for the next phase. The following morning, I woke early, made coffee, and began organizing the evidence for my lawyer. I forwarded him everything: photos, text messages, credit card statements. I wanted to make sure there wasn't a single crack in my case. At around noon, my phone buzzed. "Vanessa, we need to talk." I ignored the message. A few minutes later, another one came through. "Ethan, please. Just hear me out." This time, I responded, "Meet me at the house at 3. Don't be late." By the time Vanessa pulled into the driveway, I was sitting in the living room, a stack of documents on the coffee table in front of me. She walked in hesitantly, her face pale and drawn, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying. "Ethan," she started, her voice trembling. "Sit down," I said, cutting her off. She sank into the chair across from me, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, oppressive. Finally, I broke it. "So," I said, leaning back, "how long has this been going on?" Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I snapped, my voice sharp. "Don't insult me by lying again. I have the proof, Vanessa. All of it. So spare me the excuses and tell me the truth." She swallowed hard, her hands shaking. 6 months, she admitted quietly. 6 months. Half a year of lies, deceit, and betrayal. I felt a fresh wave of anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Why?" I asked. "What was missing? What did I do, or not do, that made you think this was okay?" "It wasn't about you," she said quickly. "I mean, I don't know. I guess I just felt unappreciated. Jake made me feel special, like I mattered. And I know that's not an excuse, but—" "No," I interrupted. "It's not." Her tears were falling freely now, but I didn't care. I'd spent weeks drowning in my own pain while she played house with someone else. She didn't get to cry and play the victim. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I found my answer. "Unbelievable," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "Ethan, please," she said, leaning forward. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to get this far. I love you. I want to fix this. We can go to counseling, we can?" "No," I said firmly. "We can't." Her face crumpled, but I pressed on. "You made your choice, Vanessa. Now you have to live with it. I've already spoken to my lawyer. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. No alimony, no house, no sympathy." Her eyes widened in panic. "Ethan, you can't do that." I made a mistake, but you can't just throw away everything we've built together." "You threw it away the moment you decided to sleep with him," I shot back. "And don't act like you're the victim here. You lied to me, betrayed me, and now you want to act like this was just a mistake? A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. This was a choice, a series of choices." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I've already spoken to Greg. Infidelity is grounds for denying alimony. I have all the evidence I need to prove it. So, unless you want this to get even uglier, I suggest you cooperate." Vanessa stared at me, her face a mixture of anger, desperation, and fear. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, but instead, she slumped back in her chair, defeated. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. I leaned forward, my voice low and steely. "I'm going to make sure you never forget what you did. I'm going to take back my life, my dignity, and my future. And I'm going to do it without you." As Vanessa left the house, I watched from the window, my chest tight with a mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't how I'd envisioned my life turning out, but at least now, I was back in control. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. By the time the divorce papers were officially filed, word of the confrontation at the company dinner had spread like wildfire. Our social circle, friends, colleagues, even casual acquaintances, was abuzz with the story. Everyone wanted the details, and while I didn't go out of my way to feed the gossip, I didn't exactly stop it either. Vanessa's world was unraveling, piece by piece. The work scandal. Vanessa's workplace was the first casualty. What I didn't anticipate, but secretly relished, was how her affair with Jake would become a professional liability. The company's HR department had a strict no-fraternization policy, and once the affair became public knowledge, they launched an internal investigation. Jake was the first to go. Apparently, he had a history of similar indiscretions, and the higher-ups decided they'd had enough. Vanessa, on the other hand, wasn't fired, but she might as well have been. Her reputation was in tatters, and she became a pariah among her colleagues. When she came to pick up the rest of her things from the house one afternoon, she looked exhausted. Her usual polished appearance was gone. No makeup, hair pulled into a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. "They put me on probation," she muttered, not meeting my gaze. "Actions have consequences," I replied, sipping my coffee. She flinched but said nothing. Then there were the friends. Or, more accurately, the people we used to call friends. Vanessa tried to play the sympathy card, spinning her side of the story to anyone who would listen. But the evidence I'd collected was too damning. Photos and texts don't lie, and once the truth was out, most people sided with me. She stopped posting on social media, probably because every time she did, it was met with a barrage of comments and DMs calling her out for what she'd done. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, thanks to the mountain of evidence I had. My lawyer, Greg, was relentless, ensuring Vanessa got nothing beyond what the law required. No alimony, no share of the house, no piece of my retirement savings. During one of our final meetings, Vanessa looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Ethan, please," she said. "I have nothing left. Can't we just—" "No," I interrupted. "You made your bed, Vanessa. Now lie in it." As satisfying as it was to see Vanessa's life fall apart, I wasn't done yet. Jake still needed to pay. It didn't take long to find the weak spot in his armor. While combing through the evidence Marcus had collected, I discovered an interesting tidbit. Jake had been padding his expense reports, billing the company for business trips that were anything but. A few anonymous emails later, complete with supporting documentation, and Jake's career was over. The company pressed charges for fraud, and the last I heard, he was working at a car dealership, trying to scrape by. For all the satisfaction I felt watching them face the consequences of their actions, there were nights when the weight of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. The house was too quiet, the bed too big. I'd spend hours replaying every moment of our marriage, wondering how I'd missed the signs. How someone I loved and trusted could betray me so completely. One night, after too many glasses of whiskey, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of vacations, birthdays, lazy Sunday mornings. In every shot, Vanessa was smiling, her eyes full of warmth. Had any of it been real? Eventually, I began to rebuild. I threw myself into work, took up running again, and reconnected with old friends. One of them, Rachel, had been a college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Rachel was everything Vanessa wasn't: grounded, kind, and honest to a fault. At first, I kept my distance, afraid to let anyone get too close. But Rachel had a way of breaking through my walls, her laughter and easygoing nature reminding me that life could be good again. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange sense of closure. Vanessa and I had been through the ringer, but in the end, I walked away stronger. Or so I thought. The day the divorce was finalized, I expected to feel triumphant, maybe even euphoric. Instead, I just felt tired. Not the kind of tired a good night's sleep could fix, but the deep, soul-wrenching exhaustion that comes from fighting a battle you never wanted in the first place. It was over, legally speaking. Vanessa was no longer my wife. Jake was out of the picture, and I had come out of it all relatively unscathed, financially at least. But there was still a heavy weight pressing on my chest, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. For weeks after the divorce, I found myself slipping into old habits. I'd reach for my phone to text Vanessa about something mundane, a funny article, a grocery list, a show I thought she'd enjoy, only to remember she wasn't there anymore. The house felt hollow without her. Her favorite mug still sat on the kitchen counter, a forgotten relic of a life that no longer existed. I tried to pack away her things, but every time I opened a closet or a drawer, memories came flooding back. It wasn't just the betrayal that haunted me. It was the good times, too. The laughter, the inside jokes, the nights we'd stayed up late talking about our dreams for the future. How could someone who'd shared all of that with me turn around and destroy it so easily? One evening, as I was cleaning out the garage, I stumbled across an old box of photos. Most of them were from college. Nights spent cramming for exams, road trips with friends, parties that blurred together in a haze of cheap beer and bad decisions. Tucked among the photos was a card from Rachel. She'd given it to me on my birthday sophomore year, a simple note scrawled in her messy handwriting. "Ethan, you're one of the good ones. Don't ever forget it." I hadn't thought about Rachel in years, but seeing that card brought back a flood of memories. She'd always been my rock back then. Steady, kind, and fiercely loyal. We'd lost touch after graduation, but I'd heard through mutual friends that she was back in town. On a whim, I sent her a message. Rachel and I met for coffee a few days later, and it was like no time had passed at all. She looked the same. Freckles, unruly auburn hair, and that infectious laugh that could light up a room. "I heard about what happened," she said gently, after we'd caught up on the basics. "Word travels fast, huh?" I replied with a wry smile. She nodded, her expression softening. "I'm sorry, Ethan. You didn't deserve that." It was the first time someone had said those words to me, and they hit harder than I expected. I'd spent so much time trying to keep up appearances, pretending I was fine, that I hadn't allowed myself to process just how much it hurt. Rachel didn't push, didn't pry. She just listened, her presence a quiet comfort. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, there was life beyond the wreckage. Rachel became a regular part of my life, not in a sweeping, romantic way, but in the small, steady ways that mattered. She'd check in with a text or a phone call, invite me to join her for a hike or a trivia night at the local bar. Slowly, the house began to feel less empty. I cleared out Vanessa's things, donated what I could, and redecorated to make the space my own. The process was therapeutic, each box I packed away feeling like a small step forward. Work became a refuge, too. I threw myself into new projects, taking on challenges that pushed me out of my comfort zone. My coworkers noticed the change, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of pride in what I was building, not just professionally, but personally. One afternoon, I received an email from Vanessa. It was short and to the point. "Ethan, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." I stared at the screen for a long time, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to reply, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain she'd caused me. But another part of me, the part that was healing, knew that no reply was the best reply. In the end, I deleted the email. Rachel and I continued to spend time together, and eventually, our friendship began to shift into something more. It wasn't a whirlwind romance or a grand declaration of love. It was quiet, steady, and real, the kind of connection built on trust and mutual respect. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "You seem lighter these days. Happier." I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "I think I am." For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. Months had passed since I'd last thought about Vanessa or Jake. My life was finally starting to feel like my own again. Between work, my growing connection with Rachel, and the clarity that comes with distance, the bitterness that had consumed me was fading. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened the door, I was greeted by a face I never thought I'd see again. Jake. He looked terrible, disheveled, gaunt, and soaked to the bone. His once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something desperate and broken. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharp. Jake hesitated, glancing over his shoulder like he was afraid someone might be watching. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice shaky. "It's about Vanessa." "Are you kidding me?" I scoffed. "Get the hell off my porch." "Please," he said, stepping closer. "Just 5 minutes. I swear, you'll want to hear this." Against my better judgment, I let him in. Jake paced the living room, wringing his hands as he spoke. "I didn't come here to make excuses," he began. "What I did to you was wrong. I know that. But you need to know the truth about Vanessa." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. "Spit it out." He took a deep breath, then said, "She used me, Ethan. She wasn't in love with me. Hell, she didn't even like me. It was all about getting ahead at work." I frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside were printed emails, messages between Vanessa and one of her supervisors. As I read them, the pieces began to fall into place. Vanessa had orchestrated the affair to manipulate Jake into helping her climb the corporate ladder. She dangled the promise of a future together, using his infatuation to get him to cover for her mistakes, advocate for her promotions, and even sabotage other colleagues. When he stopped being useful, she'd thrown him under the bus. "She's the one who reported me for the expense fraud," Jake said bitterly. "She set me up to take the fall so she could save her own skin." I stared at the emails, my mind racing. It all made sense now. Her calculated lies, her sudden detachment, the coldness beneath her charm. She hadn't just betrayed me. She betrayed everyone who trusted her. I should have felt vindicated. After all, Vanessa's true nature was finally laid bare. But instead, I felt an old, familiar anger bubbling to the surface. She'd walked away from the wreckage she caused without facing any real consequences. Jake and I sat in silence for a long time before I finally spoke. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Help me take her down," he said simply. I didn't trust him, not entirely, but I couldn't deny the appeal of the idea. Vanessa had ruined enough lives. It was time for her to face the music. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I worked together to gather evidence against Vanessa. With his insider knowledge and my connections, we uncovered a web of deceit that extended far beyond our personal lives. Vanessa had been embezzling company funds, falsifying reports, and blackmailing colleagues to keep her secrets hidden. Once we had everything we needed, I handed the evidence over to her company's board of directors. Within days, Vanessa was fired and under investigation for fraud. The fallout was swift and brutal. She lost her job, her professional reputation, and any chance of rebuilding her career. The last word. The last time I saw Vanessa was in a courthouse hallway. She was there for a deposition, flanked by her lawyer, her face pale and drawn. When her eyes met mine, she froze. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but instead, she turned and walked away. That was the closure I didn't realize I needed. Life didn't magically become perfect after that, but it was finally mine to live. Rachel and I continued to grow closer, building something honest and real. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of betrayal on my shoulders. One evening, as Rachel and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, she took my hand and said, "You've been through hell, Ethan, but you made it out stronger." I squeezed her hand, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah, I guess I did." As the stars began to appear in the night sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace.